Let's get joined up. Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joinedup. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. So thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a regular show about all things writing, including interviews with authors, screenwriters, and key figures from the publishing industry. Plus loads of hints, tips, and inspiration for all creatives. You can follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast, leave a quick iTunes review, or just tell a friend. Right, cue that new theme tune. Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. That's the hope anyway. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 129 with Mac Rogers, playwright and scriptwriter of audio dramas. Mac has lots of entertaining and informative stuff to say about his process and career, and we enjoyed a good therapy session at the end there on our perennial favourite topic, self-doubt. Before we get to that, a very quick catch-up from me as I continue to outline my TV pilot for Inkling and try to bash out the issues with the ending of my novel, both of which, I won't lie, have been slow going, but I do feel like there's lots of stuff going on there in the old back brain as I churn over ideas and attempt to solve a few creative conundrums. It's definitely helping me to work things out on paper. I know that sounds obvious, but instead of just reacting on impulse and going straight for the first idea I come up with, I'm learning to write it down and force myself to come up with at least 2 or 3 other ideas. It's hard work to resist that initial spark, and it could still turn out to be the right solution to a story problem, but by writing it down, I'm finding it's kind of freeing me up and pushing me to be more original. I've also been reading a great book called The Big Goodbye, Chinatown and the Last Years of Hollywood by Sam Wasson. As the title suggests, it gives a detailed behind-the-scenes account of how the film Chinatown came into existence, covering Robert Towne's torturous journey to a final draft, as well as talking about how Roman Polanski and Jack Nicholson helped to shape the project. I found it strangely inspirational to read about the struggles of the creative process, so if you get a chance to check it out, I highly recommend giving it a try. But what about you lot? How are things? How are you staying motivated and focused during these strange times that we're living through? Let me know in the comments. Send me a tweet at JU Podcast or Mr. Kelly to you. Leave a comment on the Facebook page or drop me an email at wayne@waynekellywrites.co.uk. Also, don't forget to join the email mailing list at joinedupwriting.co.uk to get free stuff and be the first to find out about upcoming shows and events. Right, let's get to today's interview with Mac Rogers. So Mac is an award-winning playwright based in New York, often working in the science fiction genre with plays like Universal Robots and his epic Honeycomb Trilogy. He's won acclaim from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Out and Gawker. After writing the successful podcasts The Message and Life After, Mac set up his own company, Gideon Media, to produce high-quality audio drama content, including the fantastic podcast Steal the Stars, which I highly recommend. So here's our Skype chat that we recorded just a couple of weeks ago. Joined Up Writing. Okay, Mac, thanks a million for joining me today on Joined Up Writing. I really appreciate it. So why don't we just start off, just tell everybody whereabouts you're speaking from and give us a sense of how things are going, given what's going on at the moment.
Well, I'm currently actually not at home in Long Island City, New York, which is where I normally live. My wife and I have actually spent the last couple of months in Nyack, New York, just upstate of New York, because she's been, we're staying in the basement of her sister's husband's house. My wife has sort of been a big help to them because my sister's husband is a physician. He's a cardiologist, and so he's been essential. And he's been totally fine. He hasn't had any problems, but he's had to work. He's
been on the front line.
Yeah. There's been some really long weeks, and they don't feel comfortable. Bringing in babysitters right now.
Sure, yeah.
And so I've done a little bit of babysitting, but I am utterly incompetent at it. But my wife has definitely been. But see, it's because I just get pushed around.
Yeah,
There's a
you and
really
me
willful
both. Yeah.
4-year-old who lives here, and then he just tells me what we're going to do, and that's what we do the whole time. And whatever it is, usually video games. And then later on, my wife was like, "What, yeah, Mac? You can do some of the stuff he wants to do, but you also have to tell him things to do because you're the adult."
Do you though?
He
really?
Go outside, run around a little bit. You have to tell him to do that. And I'm like, I don't think he would do it. I think he just wouldn't do it. What compelling powers do I have?
That's my view. Yeah.
Also, I'm just like, it's just the great thing about video. I don't like any of the stuff that he likes to do, but the nice thing with video games is at least it's sitting the whole time.
Which kind of goes with what you like to do, so that's a bonus.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So I think, looking back through minutes, I think it was actually, we spoke last back in 2016, which I think was just after Life After. I think you'd done the podcast Life After. And sure. Obviously since then you've been done quite a few other different bits and pieces. One of the things that I loved was Steal the Stars podcast, which I thought was,
thank you so much,
which was brilliant. Thought it was really, really good. So yeah, so why don't you just give us a bit of a catch up? What have you been up to? What are you working on at the moment?
Let's see. Since Steal the Stars, it's okay. I don't want to be seen as complaining about the period following Steal the Stars because I really shouldn't.
No, you can. It's fine.
Because it's been sort of like a mixed blessing. Both I personally and my company, Gideon Media, that made Steal the Stars, both as an individual and as a part of that company, we've had work coming in since then. But it's been a combination of with my company, we've been doing work for outside clients. We've been, creating audio drama for outside clients, and I've been doing writer for hire projects for a few other companies. Most of which has not been released, some of which I don't know if it'll ever be released, and that was some of which I was complaining, or I'm not released. I mean, not even produced.
Yeah,
I was complaining about this to some friend. They were like, "Oh my God, Mac, in Hollywood, that's all the time."
Yeah, you've been paid to write, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
But it's like there's a part of me like it's I've been getting really kind of edgy, because it's been quite a long time since I've released a proper series. Mm-hmm. Now, thanks to getting to guest write on a few long-running podcasts, I have had some work released. So I'm very grateful that the Truth podcast and the Tuman Bay podcast have hired me as a guest writer. So I have had some, stuff, get released to the public. But there's the weird feeling of like it's. The series finale of Steal the Stars aired on Halloween 2017. Mm-hmm. I haven't released a proper series since then, and I'm getting really edgy about that. Now I really want to get back out there, but it's been very hard for my company to raise the funds necessary to finance another series. We've been approaching doing that in different ways, because with Steal the Stars, we produced it according to U.S. SAG-AFTRA regulations, which you don't have to do with a podcast. If you don't use any union actors, obviously you can make a podcast for a much smaller budget.
Sure.
But it was a situation where we were, because of the co-production with Tor McMillan, we were able to produce Steal the Stars on a union budget, paying all the actors union minimums or more. And that was a really great feeling. That was the first time in my life, after many years of producing low budget independent theater plays, that was the very first time that I'd ever paid my employees minimum wage. Yeah. And there was a feeling, and more in some cases, and there was a feeling of, both me and my colleague Sean Williams were, we really don't want to step back from that. We don't feel like we're above. We don't feel like we're in any way above producing podcasts the way many fiction podcasts are done, which is like, some folks and their friends
on a shoestring,
talented artists or whatever. It's just we in fact we have made one show in that approach that is going to be coming out this year, but there is a feeling of it gave us such a feeling of satisfaction to be properly compensating the artists who were working for us that we have felt very reluctant to want to scale back to a smaller way and approach the same people that we paid minimum wage, and then ask them to come back for less. So we've been trying very hard to raise the funds to do something again on the Steal the Stars scale, and that's been quite difficult in terms of finding the right, co-producers.
Because I think when we spoke about it's been a while since I listened to Life After, but if I remember rightly, wasn't Life After, was that sponsored? Did you get a sponsorship from like a corporate to do Life After?
Yeah, Life After was like that. That was a writer for hire project. And it was. It's funny. I didn't realize when I had a good thing going. The Life After. The weirdly enough, GE who sponsored that. It was a GE branded, that one and The Message are both GE branded entertainments. And looking back, based on subsequent work for hire projects, they gave me an astonishing amount of creative freedom with those two shows. Yeah. Particularly with Life After. Life After, I pretty much just wrote that the way I would if I was all by myself. They let me write my type of story. I mean, with John Dryden, who was the director, he had a lot of dramaturgical input, but it was basically the show that I would write if I was writing a show and John Dryden was giving me notes and nobody else was involved. Which is great. Astonishing amount of creative freedom. But the thing, I knew from the very outset that I didn't have any participation in the intellectual property of the rights to the show. And I had kind of a funny experience when I was in Los Angeles doing a bit of pitching 2 years ago. I went into a meeting to pitch at this one entertainment company, and as we were meeting the people inside, who I don't think I'm allowed to say, but it's not important to the story. I met the people inside. They were like, "Oh, sure." I told them my name, and they were like, "Oh, sure, we have Life After." And there was I was kind of in an astonished silence because
you didn't know that, yeah.
I knew that it was obviously GE's option as they wished. They're not under any obligation to notify me. But at the end of the meeting, I was like, we did the regular meeting, and I was in the back of my head, I was thinking, well, maybe they want me for it. I mean, I created all the characters, I created all the scenario. Maybe so. At the end of the meeting, I decided to throw out a little feeler, right? Yeah. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that Life After is in such good hands, and they're like, yep, and they walked off. And the weirdest thing.
That's so LA though.
It's so and I knew that's how it would work. Nobody cheated me. I know this, but it was kind of a shock to. It was kind of a shock to experience because the experience of writing Life After was I was in my tiny apartment.
It's strange, isn't it? It's like one of those things again, like where the writer kind of gets the role of the writer just gets diminished, as you say, and it becomes like a property. But it seems strange to me. But then again, I would say this because I write. But it seems strange to me that somebody would look at something like that, a creative idea that's been written by one person, and they've optioned it, and you wouldn't think. I'm not necessarily saying that they would definitely go to you and say, Mac, write as a movie or a TV series, but you'd think that they would kind of be interested in some kind of input, or it seems strange, doesn't it? Like they can detach the two things so cleanly, like, well, this is just a product, like it's a can of beans off the shelf or something.
It was wild just watching them walk off down the corridors of power. They're like amazing, like huge, grand Hollywood office. And I was like, God, when I wrote that thing, I was just this grungy guy in my tiny office. And it just felt like writing any of my plays. But they're like, oh, yeah, we'll take it from here. It was just, and I knew that's how it worked. It was just a weird, totally different thing to experience it emotionally like that. You're right. They're basically like, that detaching idea that you're talking about, like as far as they're concerned, they're like, okay, well, there's like 4 things in here we don't like the other 28 things, so we're going to take those 4 things and give them to some other people and say amp up the 4 things and we'll do something else. And so it's but that's so with Life After, there was no question but that I was that there was no question that my involvement ended as soon as the writing process was done. Now, atypically, John Dryden, because just a much more British approach. He very much wanted me at every recording.
Yeah.
I was constantly there, sort of standing a bit diagonally behind him because there were constantly little dialogue tweaks that were needed as we went along. And I don't know if British directors are just way more secure than American ones, but very often when an actor had a question about a motivation or something, he just looked at me like I could answer that question, which I was happy to. I mean,
but you were surprised he was asking.
Yeah, it was weird because like a lot of times with directors in rehearsal, I try to be mindful of their authority. I try not to undermine them by saying stuff unless they want me to.
Sure, yeah.
And I was just very surprised that John was just very relaxed about me telling them things that I hadn't necessarily cleared with him first.
Yeah.
I think from John's point of view, it was like, as long as he got a couple of line readings he was happy with to go into post with, that he was fine, whatever we talked about. But yeah, so there's definitely been the challenge of, because we had the intellectual property rights of Steal the Stars, because it's the kind of thing where, we have had some interest in pitching that some places or whatever. We want to have the ability to hold on to intellectual property where we can, but that's not an option many places in the American podcast industry. So it's quite difficult to find. It's quite difficult to find co-producers in the podcast field, like big podcast companies that want to allow you to hold on to the intellectual property, because of course they're thinking of that as part of their revenue stream for later. Again, I understand it from their point of view. That it's quite difficult to make money on ad-supported podcasts, American style ad-supported podcasts. It can be even difficult just to recoup your budget. So a lot of people have their eye on that film or television option as being part of the revenue stream. So what we're doing right now, we're still talking to people about possible co-productions, and maybe we'll find something that works out. But in the meantime, we're like, okay, well, if we're getting this corporate work to do for other people, let's try to see if we can save up. Let's see if we can build up funds from these outside jobs to the point where we can actually just make something in-house with it. That's a slow, incremental process, but that's what we're doing right now with an eye toward eventually, with any luck, late this year, getting rolling on our next like Life After Steal the Stars style proper full series, like a 10 or 12 episode series, though we will have some smaller scale projects coming out in the interim.
It's interesting, isn't it, with the podcasting thing, because audio dramas, something I've been interested in myself, and I've thought, well, because I work in video production, I do sound and things. I think, well, I could do a lot of the production myself. I'd still need to hire in actors and things like that. But again, I think the idea of starting from scratch, I mean, it's even a smaller market over here. I mean, we've obviously got BBC Radio and things anyway, and we've got podcasts, but in terms of getting a large enough audience off the bat to be able to recoup your costs is tricky. I mean, it's tricky. Podcasting's difficult anyway as regards that. Building an audience is, there's so many, the joke is, how many people have got podcasts? Everyone's got a podcast these days and all that sort of thing. So it's difficult to stand out at the best of times. And when you're starting off, obviously, with the thing about, say, Steal the Stars or Life After or any of those kind of audio, but especially the self-contained ones that run for a limited series, is you're kind of going from a standing start. You're actually not around for that long. You're only around for a few weeks while the episodes go out, and you've kind of got to build. I know that they live on and they're kind of online or whatever, but you've got to kind of build a market, an audience from scratch, haven't you? It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, it's particularly because I've been drawn to the mini-series format rather than the multi-season format.
Yeah.
Which is like, I constantly, when I look at the when I look at the American podcasts the American fiction podcasts that are most beloved, not all of them, but a common theme is that they are multi-season shows where the fans have really fallen in love with the characters and have gotten really invested in their trials and tribulations. Yeah. You look at Bright Sessions, Wolf 359, Ars Paradoxica, shows of that nature that have gotten audiences really quite deeply invested in the characters. A part of that takes being able to spend multiple seasons or series of time with them.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me when I look at that kind of thing where like, say, oh man, I wish, I wish I had a character that people loved as much as like Caleb from the Bright Sessions or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like the Bright Sessions fans got to spend a couple years, getting to know him. Whereas my characters, it tends to be, and this is a big writing someone who wants to make a living at writing. When I conceptualize a story, when I conceptualize a serial story, my brain naturally wants to go to a place where it has some kind of defined endpoint. Yeah, like it's very hard for me to conceive of a story that's just supposed to go for a while because everything I know about writing is like, how is this scene, even the most casual scene, even the most comic relief or character beat scene, how is this scene taking us in some way toward the conclusion, toward the culmination of the themes? And without actually having a conclusion set, I find myself enormously hamstrung when I approach each individual scene because I just don't know
where you're headed. Don't know.
Yeah, it's like, am I treading water? Am I going on a course with this or whatever? So I just, because my own personal creativity very much gravitates toward the miniseries format.
Me too, yeah.
And most of the ideas, that my company is developing are miniseries ideas. And quite often when we get into conversations with other people about co-production, people quite understandably, they want to hear about a multi-season idea. They want to hear about something that, that can go for a while. Although I will say this, I think actually people should, entertainment industry people should invest a bit more in miniseries, not just in a self-serving way, but I feel like I'm increasingly having conversations and seeing social media messaging and so forth where there is, I think there's an increasing amount of fatigue with hearing that a show is amazing, a show in any medium.
Yeah.
And finding out that there's 45 episodes that they need to watch. I think that people tend to be, I think more and more people are going to be drawn to situations where it's like, oh, this thing is amazing, and there's only 10 episodes and you've seen the whole story. Because I think people, a lot of people are saying various versions of recreational TV is starting to feel like homework. I mean, there's certain shows where it's like you never want them to end because you love the characters so much you all just want to be around them all the time. But I do think there's a fair number of viewers that would like to have the feeling that they could ever possibly consume the stuff that they've heard is good.
For definite. And I think it's one of those things, not to denigrate audiences or anything, because I'm one of them, but I think it's also one of those things, sometimes you don't know that that's what you want until you have it. I think sometimes, because we've all had, with things with like Breaking Bad and all those kind of things, they had quite a lot of episodes, but at the end of the day, there was an arc. It did have or Sopranos or any of these things, it did have an arc, It did have an ending, and yes, people complain briefly about it, but I think it's good. I think at the end of the day, people do enjoy the fact that they went on a journey and they got to the end of the journey where it wasn't, because there's so many things now as well that get commissioned, and then especially with things like Netflix, with how it works, and they cancel it after one season even though they've greenlit the whole season, and they decide whilst the season's going out, like in the case of Netflix. I know it's happened with things. Was there something called 7 Seconds or something? I seem to remember quite recently. And I saw the trailers and stuff for that, and I thought, well, that looks really good. And then I heard, before I started watching it, I heard that it had been cancelled, and I thought, well, they've not going to have satisfactorily concluded probably haven't, I'm guessing, because they weren't planning on only doing one season. So I didn't watch it, which is bad, but I think that's the case. So and miniseries is probably a bit more of a thing over here, just because our budgets are a lot smaller on a lot of things. So you do tend to get things that might be, sometimes it's like 3 and 4 episodes, or maybe 6 episodes or something, and that is it a lot of the time. It's kind of one story. And if something's wildly successful like Killing Eve, I mean, Killing Eve wasn't, my understanding is it wasn't supposed to be more than one season, but it was so kind of successful, and the initial things with it when it was going out was that they kind of decided that they were going to, push on with it. Definitely past series 2. So, it does happen. But yeah, I'm with you. I like those kind of mini-series things, or I think they call them limited series now. I think Netflix calls them, you get the odd one. I think that Hollywood thing that's just come on Netflix over here, I think it's called Hollywood, and I think that's a limited series. Yeah, it just tells one story. So I'll definitely... but I understand. But then, as I say, from a podcast point of view, I also totally understand that a lot of the time something needs to be around for a long period of time to kind of build an audience. And people kind of want to come back, and people do look how many episodes there are of things. And I think the weird thing about podcasts is that I'm not sure whether it's necessarily the case of a drama podcast, maybe, but with a lot of the time with podcasts, people do look at podcasts, and if there are only like 12 episodes, then they might think, oh, it's not been around very long, or B, it's finished and there's not going to be any more, so I might not bother with it. It's kind of a strange, It's kind of a strange thing. It's kind of opposite to TV in some ways, I think. Excuse me, but yeah, it is interesting, as you say. So I didn't realise. So Gideon Media is something you put together to do these kind of productions and do what presumably corporate commission projects and things as well, or.
Well, mostly. I mean, we formed the company to make things like Steal the Stars. The idea was like, when the co-owner of the company, Sean Williams, who's the producer on Steal the Stars, he and I and some other colleagues of ours had produced theater for many years, and it got sort of increasingly ambitious, independent theater, but it got increasingly ambitious without increasing resources. So the last several things we produced were these like really epic science fiction plays that basically just like absolutely fried us on every level to produce. It wasn't just mentally exhausting, but simply like doing the sets, doing all the everything about it was physically exhausting. And we hit a certain age where we were like, we can't keep this up anymore. And there was a little bit of like, what other media are out there? Right around the time we were sort of hitting our limit with our ability to produce theater, was when I got the job to write The Message. And when I started to notice that fiction podcasts were like sort of really taking off, and I discovered how much I was enjoying that type of writing, it occurred to me that Sean, who'd produced theater with me all this time, before he got into doing theater stuff, he spent many years as a producer, sound engineer for an educational children's music company. For many years, he had arranged music, directed choirs, and then done post-production. So he'd done a lot of audio production. I went to him and said, how hard would it be for us to make audio dramas just in-house? He goes, actually, so we can get our heads in the right equipment. He said, not that hard at all, and certainly be way less physically taxing than theater. So we decided to form the company, and we were still kind of casting around for what we were going to do first when the Tor McMillan people approached us, saying that they wanted to co-produce a science fiction idea, because a few of their editors had been watching our plays for years, especially just Tor being specifically a science fiction imprint. A couple of their editors had gotten interested in the fact that we were doing science fiction plays, because that's not that common of a thing. It's getting slightly more common, but when we were really in the thick of doing it, it was quite unusual. And particularly the really pulpy science fiction plays we were doing. So they were familiar with our work, and they knew the fact that I had written successfully in audio a couple of times. So they came to us and said, we'd like to, co-produce something with you. We gave them a big stack of ideas. They really clicked with Steal the Stars. And so we to our great surprise, we found the very first project we were doing was an enormously ambitious 14 episode, miniseries. We totally thought we were going to start with a couple of hour-long self-contained stories or whatever. But the offer on the table was too good to walk away from. So we're like, all right, let's just hitch up our pants and do this. So it was. And our hope was, that not only would we have the, creative satisfaction of doing, but that it would be a calling card for us to be able to, make future projects. We couldn't assume that Tor McMillan would want. This was just the one project. We couldn't assume that they were going to be in a permanent collaboration with us. So there was always the awareness. Oh, okay, well, where's the budget for the next one going to come from? But our thought was, okay, if we can really nail Steal the Stars, then that's sort of not just the creative satisfaction, but that's also our shingle. That's also our reel. Yeah. That's if that's out in the world saying here's what this particular team can put together for you. And at first it seemed like that wasn't working out because for about a year after Steal the Stars, we were really struggling to get anything. And then all of a sudden we started getting a whole bunch of outside work to the point where we were having to work. Oh my gosh, we've got a full-time job now, handling work for a couple of these clients. We're like, this is almost like 8 hours a day of work, which is great. Job, yeah. But it was it reminded me. I just saw some interview with Paul McCartney where he said, yeah, I started a rock band because I didn't want to work. Yeah. And then he said, it turned out it turned out it was a lot of work. Obviously I'm very grateful to have work and have money coming in. Sure. But it was, the funny thing about it was we were so used to making theater that it didn't occur to us that Steal the Stars would continue to function as a calling card indefinitely. It wasn't going anywhere. Yeah. It wasn't helping. It wasn't leading to any work for about a year. And then suddenly, mysteriously, after a year, suddenly it started getting us work. We started getting calls from people who specifically were interested in working with us because they had heard Steal the Stars, because of course Steal the Stars hadn't closed. It had to clear out of some theater that we'd rented somewhere. Yeah. It was still sitting there on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, and people discovered it. So it did lead to work. In some distant dream era, in the far future, we would love to be exclusively, developing ideas, in house. Every artist dreams of just being able to make a living with total creative freedom. But at the same time, we're not. Me and Sean aren't young, starry-eyed lads. We're realistic. We know the fact that, that if we're able to continue to get outside work, that's probably going to, be the case for a while and maybe for the rest of our lives. I mean, that's most artists who can subsist at some level. Not every job is a dream job. And the fact of the matter is, we've been quite fortunate that at the moment, I'm unable to talk about any of the outside work we're doing because none of it's been publicly announced yet. But it's not like brutal, awful mercenary work. It's creating audio stories in interesting worlds with lovely scripts from lovely writers or whatever. And so as much as I talk about it as a means to an end, when you compare it to the many other jobs one might have in life, it's a very fortunate. We have no idea how long it can last. As always with artists, you're always aware that the tap could turn off tomorrow. Yeah. You're constantly, and of course, right now we're in an utterly unique period of uncertainty. Although the phone's kind of been ringing off the hook a little bit because everyone is kind of like, oh, is this the one media we can produce in for a while? I was
just going to say that, yeah. That's what I was going to, one of the things I was going to ask you about that specifically with the what's going on in the world with the pandemic and everything, that must be, I mean, obviously theatre is just not happening at the moment at all, and films are sort of starting to talk about getting back into some kind of production schedule, but then the kinds of things that they're going to be able to shoot for a while are going to be pretty limited, I would have imagined. So yeah, audio seems like it could be coming up in the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what everybody's doing right now is trying to figure out a reliable method of remote recording. This is the conversation I have with like lots of other people in audio drama right now. Is what is it like? I know I eagerly the big Finnish company that makes the Doctor Who's, they released their first remote recorded story recently, and I snapped it right up because I wanted to hear what it would sound like. They
How was
recorded. It sounded like I think Big Finish has like they've got a built-in advantage in that their production style is a real kind of like wall of sound type of thing where every single minute is scored, every single minute is packed with sound effects. So it's I listened to it, I was like, well, I guess it's because the big question I wanted to have was like, okay, it was like, does the Doctor and the companions, do they sound like they're in the same room? And it's like, I guess they do. Although I guess it might be a little trickier. The one thing I wasn't sure was like if it would have that right feeling in a scene that was like just the dialogue and just a silent, a non-scored scene with more.
It kind of just got some ambience in the background or something.
Yeah, and the Big Finish doesn't really. I mean, I consume a lot of their stuff. They don't really do sort of like spare ambiance-based scenes. They're really into like big epic scoring all the time. Yeah, and so like I guess the big thing I'm looking for is like remote recorded stuff that like has that. We're doing a bit of remote recording right now, and we're trying different processes. For making it. To see if we can, give it the right feeling. And I know other people are as well. And with the feeling like, because we're not at all comfortable with reopening our studio until we've got like, so we're in New York, we're in Queens, New York. I mean, like our studio is in, I mean, it's not in the epicenter neighborhood of Queens, but it's still Queens, New York is like probably the biggest spot in the whole U.S. for coronavirus, for COVID-19. So we want to be we want to feel very certain that we can have a bunch of actors in a small room declaiming lines at each other, because right now that sounds like a nightmare scenario. But we're but because for our own projects and because for outside projects, people want to get back in action. They want to say we're in the process of experimenting with stuff. We're talking to other people who are experimenting with stuff. So there's definitely a feeling of, can we make this work? Can this be a durable thing for a while in case, production has to be massively curtailed until there's a vaccine. In case, I know a lot of people are afraid of a second outbreak in the fall when the weather turns cold again. There's definitely, I think there's a lot of eyes on audio in a way to see if it's like, because a feeling I'm definitely having is that in terms of like the entertainment field and the very tiny peripheral corner of it that I'm in, there's still there's the feeling that there's a tremendous amount of energy that doesn't exactly have anywhere to go right now. There's like all this creative power, all this organizational energy. And like, I feel like I've been in all these meetings recently because I feel like on some level, and I think people may not even be aware they're doing it. People are scheduling meetings upon meetings because
they want to feel like they're doing something.
Yeah. So we're for all that stunted energy, all that thwarted energy.
I can relate to that. Yeah.
And so we're constantly doing that. Yeah,
definitely. So it seems, obviously, as you say, you produce like the Honeycomb Trilogy and these big epic kind of science fiction theatre pieces and stuff. And then you move into audio. When you sat down to write your first audio, and not just like a one-off as well, obviously it was like a series that you started. You write. Did you say you wrote on The Message first, and then you did Life After? Is that right?
Yeah, The Message was my very first audio. and it was like, now I'd been listening to a lot of audio, prior to then. I guess what happened was, as a big Doctor Who fan, I hadn't gotten into the Big Finish audio for a surprisingly long time. Even as a big Doctor Who fan, I just I don't know. I guess I was just doing a whole lot of other stuff, and then like right around the 50th anniversary, I just sort of wanted to just consume Doctor Who content all the time. I was in sort of like a mania with it. I started getting into the audios, and I was listening to the audios, and I was really enjoying those. And then that kind of led me to, getting curious about other audios. Like I discovered a BBC radio play that starred Paul McGann, who also played the Eighth Doctor Who. And so I was like, okay, I'll listen to this because I like Paul McGann. Yeah. And then I listened to that and I was like, oh, I really like this. And it was the first time I was like, oh, okay, this is an audio drama, and it's a very different production style from the Big Finish style that I've been exclusively listening to. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I started tooling around the BBC, Radio 3, Radio 4 websites, and listening to different audio dramas on there. So I started getting interested in the form before the message job came up. So I was at least able to tell them that I'd been listening to a lot of audio drama, even if I hadn't written any before, which I knew would make it make me a tough sell to them, as the writer for their big project. Yeah. But I was able to say that I'd listened to a lot. The only thing I knew before the phone interview was that they wanted it to be Serial with aliens, like the true crime podcast Serial. And I hadn't, at that point, I hadn't listened to Serial yet. So the day before the call, I just listened to the whole series. Yeah. That was one thing that was nice about it, was that I didn't necessarily, once I had the job, I didn't necessarily have to have a full toolbox of audio writing techniques, because the commission was specifically to write in that one style. Yeah. To make it sound like a documentary Serial. Yeah, exactly. And that nothing could happen that didn't fit into that format. So that's always been something that I've enjoyed doing, is strongly adhering to. I love the feeling of like jumping into a new format and like kind of learning how to swim in that world. So like, so that was I kind of had the ideal first two audio projects to kind of learn on. Was the first one was write very specifically in this format that you can't ever depart from. Everything that happens, you have to find a reason why a microphone was nearby. Yeah. And then the second project I worked on had, John Dryden, this major long-running radio drama talent, directing it. So like the notes that I was getting on the scripts as we were developing it weren't just story notes. They were also, here's how audio drama works notes. Yeah. And
so it's a great way to learn.
Yeah, exactly. It was very much under. He was constantly, saying this day's like, it's sort of giving me the realities of it. There's certain things that like certain habits I developed with theater where like, I wouldn't have people using the other person's name in sentences all the time. Yeah. How dare you, Wayne? Like I wouldn't put Wayne in there because like you wouldn't,
you're looking at them, yeah.
But John was like, no, you kind of have to do that. Yeah, you have to you with audio drama, you need to imagine a brand new person coming in and get them oriented into the situation. Yeah. You need to find like if you're starting a new scene in a new location. Unless disorientation is part of what you're trying to do, you need to you have to do a few things that would feel hacky under other circumstances, because once people know where they are and who the speaking characters are, then they can relax and follow the story. Yeah. If they're struggling to figure those things out, they're missing parts of the story that you want them to get. Yeah. And so like there was certain things like that, and then certain things like John really impressed upon me switching up the kinds of locations. When I first designed the story of Life After, nearly all of it took place in different FBI offices. And even so, I mean, the story could only change so much. The finished product was still mostly in FBI offices.
Sure.
But a big note of John's was the human ear needs variety.
Like a break.
You can't give them. Yeah, if it's the same ambiance over and over and over again, it's like sleeping on one side of your body all night long or whatever. It's going to become sort of. So it's like, so he was constantly after me to go, any scene you could imagine taking place in a room or an outdoors area with a different feeling, do that. And so I went back to the script with a fine-tooth comb, relocated all sorts of scenes to outdoors, to apartments, kind of reworked the climax so that it could take place in a big warehouse, all kinds of stuff that would so that John could then create, John and Steve Bond, the sound designer, could give the listeners a lot of variety as it went through. And I took that very much on board, when I wrote Steal the Stars, that, John was not involved in, obviously, with Steal the Stars from the very beginning, from the outline stage. I designed it very much for all different kinds of locations, all different kinds of aural environments. I feel like it was just pure luck that it turned out this way. But the two GE projects, my first two audio drama writing situations, were both inadvertently excellent training projects because of the specific challenges and resources that they had.
It's just how cinematic it can be. I know that sounds strange because it's not a visual medium, but it is really, really cinematic medium. I always think sound in terms of audio drama, in terms of what you can do with those different settings, because you're not limited by budget, you're not limited by, you can, as you say, I mean, it's perfect for sci-fi, isn't it?
Oh yeah, so well, I mean, I love the fact that you could, if you can sort of make it sound like that thing is happening, you can have anything happen. You can have there's absolutely no limit to the storytelling. I mean, one thing with Steal the Stars was really, I was going into Steal the Stars with a lot of confidence coming off the last two shows. And I was like, you know what? It's really time to stretch my legs with this stuff. It's really time to get the low budget theater mentality out of my head and just make this an absolutely epic, earth-shaking story, and like when I got to the finale, I definitely scared myself a little bit I wrote the finale, which is sort of like the most sort of epic thing I'd ever written to this point, because it was the first time I'd written a set of circumstances without having to be mindful of how it would be realized visually. Yeah. And I actually sent it over to the sound designer. I was like, please tell me if this is impossible, because I can think of something else. He's like, no. He's like, wait, it'll be difficult. It's just going to take me a while.
He loves the challenge of it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's nothing in here that's impossible, and I loved that feeling of like, well, we might as well really just go a little nuts with this. Let's make something epic happen, as long as we have the resources for it.
Well, it was really epic and it was really cinematic. So how did you, when you sit down? So if you're writing another Steal the Stars tomorrow or whatever, a kind of limited audio drama series. So have you kind of got a set process now and a way that you work? How do you tackle the story in terms of thinking out the beats of the story? Do you outline heavily? Do you just go, well, let's start with the characters, put them together and then see what develops and then start working out from there? How do you, what's your kind of process?
Since getting into audio drama, it's had to vary pretty widely based on the parameters of the project. I'd gotten into a pretty regular process with playwriting, because it was just a completely different. I'd only ever done independent theater. I didn't do development with larger companies or whatever. So it was pretty much just, I write the script, do a reading, get some feedback, write another draft, whatever I did. And I was working with a lot of the same colleagues who trusted me. So there was definitely a feeling of I could just kind of go away, do my own crazy thing, and show up with a finished product, or at least a finished draft or whatever. People wouldn't be able to have a hand in it while I was writing it.
Yeah.
with audio drama, that's very often not been the case. Steal the Stars actually is probably the script I've written for audio that's most like my playwriting process, in the sense that everyone kind of just let me do my thing with it. When I finished the first draft of the 14 episodes, everyone involved, my Gideon Media colleagues and the folks from Tor Macmillan, they had notes. They gave me notes,
sure.
Some of which I used, some of which I didn't, and I did a revision. I think I did a couple revisions, but other people had the same amount of input that I basically had with plays, which is I've always had notes from other people, but I've always I always incorporate the ones that I think are right and not the ones that I don't think are right. But since getting into audio, especially the shows where they're being produced by like a big company, a lot more people get to give you notes, especially if it's a writer for hire situation and another production company is putting up the money. In a lot of cases, you kind of have to take the notes, and every company kind of seems to have a different approach to how they develop stuff. Mm-hmm. So I've had to be adaptable in a way that was different. It was difficult for me in a way that it probably wouldn't be for like a young writer getting into television or film. To them, that's just what writing is.
Yeah.
And it's an innate part of the process is just lots and lots of
revisions, notes, and
yeah. And there's lots of people, and the writing process is a very public process where every single thing is checked out with multiple other people. Whereas I spent all of my 20s, 30s writing all alone. Yeah. Developing things all by myself with my own kind of weird private madness, and having to adjust later in life to getting the kinds of jobs where where there's enough money on the line that people are going to want to interfere a lot. That's been a tough adjust. It's been like anyone having to adjust to anything after the prime educational years, mm-hmm. After the prime years where you sort of, I developed some habits. So in answer to your question, when it's my druthers, I prefer to broadly outline the story first. The outlining of the story, in a way that I can't completely explain, kind of also creates the characters for me. Mm-hmm. So what I like to do, I don't like to write treatments if I'm just doing something by myself. When there's a lot of other people that need to okay what the story is going to be, then I have to write a detailed treatment. Mm-hmm. And I have done some of those. I wrote very detailed treatments for The Message and Life After, for example. Mm-hmm. But because there were multiple companies involved in the productions of those two shows, and everybody really needed to know what the story was going to be so that they could sign off on it. With Steal the Stars, I was left to myself so much that I was able to do more my dream process, which is where I basically, my ideal situation is to get the entire thing on a single piece of paper. With Steal the Stars, I had a single piece of paper with bullet points for each of the 14 episodes. And that was sort of like my macro outline. And after each episode number was just like the handful of just broad stroke things that happened in the episode. It was like each one was like 3 sentences max, usually 2. Or even just like rather than sentences, just a bunch of clauses explaining the things that were supposed to happen. Yeah. And then I would have a single sheet of paper for each individual episode that we, just with the quick bullet points for what's supposed to happen in the individual episode. I really like having things in a stripped down fashion like that because it keeps present in my mind the global sense of the show. Mm-hmm. That even when I'm writing a small bore like character based scene, I'm mindful of how it's contributing to the whole. Mm-hmm. There was a scene in Steal the Stars where Dak, the main character, and her best friend Patty, who's like her second in command at the secret underground base, they're just goofing off with each other, making fun of each other's lunchtime meals because Dak's a vegetarian and Patty very much isn't, and they're just kind of poking fun at each other and bantering back and forth. But because I had that full script outline next to me at the computer, I was aware of the fact that the overarching arc between Dak and Patty was that eventually Patty was going to slowly realize that the Dak was up to no good. Mm-hmm. And, her hero worship was eventually going to give way to, becoming a major adversary, and that the two of them were going to have a really climactic face-off right near the end of the show. So I knew to build in a little bit of tension into that scene, which is that, their goofy, joking conversation moved a little bit into the area of the fact that if Dak was to ever move up to a higher ranking position, that might take her either to an administrative wing or out of the military base altogether, that would be a good thing for Patty's career. Mm-hmm. But Patty, who adores and hero worships Dak, she doesn't want her to go away ever. Mm-hmm. So I built in a little bit of underlying tension into that scene so that even that scene doesn't advance the plot in any way, except that it slightly magnifies the tension between those two characters, mm-hmm. which will end up having major repercussions in the first half of the final episode. Like Patty's a major player in the finale. So
you're sort of laying the groundwork. It's doing two things, though, isn't it? As you say, because it's also it is showing character as well, and it's giving us a bit more depth of character. But it's also laying the groundwork for that dramatic beat that's going to happen later on in the story.
Yeah, because you've got to have. You got to have like some goofy low stakes moments. Mm-hmm. You can't at a certain point it just becomes unbearable if it's basically nothing but tension all the time. Partly because the goofy low stakes moments are where you're emotionally investing in the characters, where you spend a little time with them, just like something a little silly, just something a little bit off the clock, mm-hmm. where you kind of laugh with them and you kind of like them a little bit, so that when they're in terrible peril later, you remember how you like them and you want them to get out of it. Yeah. But at the same time, you can use those moments interestingly. The plot doesn't have to come to a stop. Yeah, and so for me, if I get to work exactly the way that I like, without any sort of outside input, without other people who need to know the whole plot so they can sign off on it, I prefer to have a really minimalist skeletal outline of the whole series and a minimalist skeletal outline of each individual episode, so that I never lose sight of where the whole thing is going. I have never been one of those writers who could work without an outline. What a lot of writers tell me is that they're like, oh yeah, for TV and film, I always have an outline. For plays, I discover it as I go. Mm-hmm. But for me, I can't write in any format without an outline. I feel completely at sea without it. I really, really need to know, okay, where in the story is this? What point of rising tension are we at right now? Where is every character in their journey? So I know exactly how to pitch them in this moment. And for whatever reason, I don't need to spend separate time writing out character portraits, because the process of creating that outline in a way that's hard for me to articulate kind of creates the characters, because the outline is not just the plot, it's also their arcs.
Sure.
By the time I've done that, by the time I've completed that outline, I kind of know who they are. The difficult situations you get into as a professional writer is when the people paying you to write something have a sharply different vision for the material than you have. And so I've always told myself, well, here's how I'll navigate that. If it's a money project, I'll just do what they want. Then I'll do my own stuff privately. But it turned out that wasn't the significant challenge I found on some of my less pleasant projects has been that kind of nobody knows what they want.
Yes.
And every time you turn something in, the notes that you get on that version contradict the notes on the previous version. And you start to have this deeply sinking feeling that there actually isn't a vision for the project.
Completely. I mean, I'm going to say, I mean, it's different, but I mean, my day job is video production, and a lot of that is, I mean, it is kind of like corporate video, promotional video, those kind of things. But you'll have to come up with some kind of creative. And we always kind of joke that the client never really knows what they want until they see the thing, and then they know that. They still don't know what they want, but they know that isn't it. If you see what I mean. So I don't know what I want, but it's not that. And I don't know whether maybe it's just to do with how creative people's brains are wired in compared to other people. I don't know. But maybe it's an imagination thing, but they often can't articulate at all, give you any kind of steer on it. And then so you kind of, as you say, you take a flyer on it and you think, right, we'll go with this then. I think they've got them sold on this. And then you go for it and they go, no, that's not it. And you say, okay, well, what shall I change, or what would you like to be different? I don't know, but that's not right. And that's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah, there's nothing quite as that's kryptonite to me. Like Jordana Williams, who directed most of my plays and then directed Steal the Stars. Jordana and I have had some really big arguments about the direction of a story, about the direction of a script. Just some really arguments that have dragged on for several days about certain things. But it's funny, since getting into some other projects, I've come to realize how fortunate I am that those were the arguments I was having, because she and I have been collaborators for 20 years now. So I know that if I have an argument with Jordana about a story point on Tuesday, and then we have another argument about that story point on Thursday, that both days Jordana will have the exact same objection to what I've written, because she has a different belief, a different innate belief about what the script should be. So she's arguing from her vision versus my vision. And we can go back and forth until we find a synthesis that we're happy with. Now I've learned to be fond of that. I've learned to think of that quite positively, because I've had a couple of situations where when I would have an argument with people on Tuesday and then another one on Thursday, they'd be saying totally different things on Thursday.
Yeah, it's so infuriating.
And I'm like, well, what direction are we going in? What's true north here? Because I'm like, I can't believe how hard you're making it for me to just do what you want.
Yes.
I will totally just do what you want.
Yeah.
But I can't chase a moving target. Yeah. But what you just said is what other people, when I go off on this particular rant, other people start saying, Mac, look, you just have to keep trying things until they say, oh, that's it. I said, you just have to accept the fact that in some cases, other people just kind of don't have a vision, and they just want to. They don't.
And also, I mean, I've had things where I've actually submitted a script to them before, or at least an outline of what we're going to do. And then when they I love this idea. I love this idea. You've sold them on that idea. Yes, I love that. You might have even found another video that's similar that you can show them that's a similar sort of thing. And then you show it to them and they go, yeah, I like that. But if you can just take out that little bit, and you're like, well, no, because it's all predicated on, that's what the idea is. And as soon as you take one of these things out now, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and it's like there's some people who this kind of client navigating is second nature because they've been doing it from a very young age. This kind of instinctive. I'm really feeling I'm really feeling very much like this creaky old dog who's having to learn new tricks, because for a very long time, I worked day jobs and then just wrote exactly what I wanted to write.
Yeah.
Now that those two things have merged, the writing and the making the money I need to live from month to month, it's become a different circumstances, and some people, it's so. But the problem is, I didn't spend any time in my 20s or 30s developing client navigation skills. Most people have been developing those skills for a very long time, and I'm kind of scrambling to catch up.
I don't think it ever gets any easier, though, if that makes you feel better.
Okay. It does kind of. I appreciate that.
Okay, so just as we wrap things up, because I know I've taken a lot of your time. So self-doubt is something that comes up a lot on this podcast, and a lot speaking to writers and creatives in general. So is self-doubt something that you suffer with or have suffered with? And if so, kind of how do you deal with it on a day-to-day basis?
I don't deal with it very well at all. This would be the kind of thing where I should absolutely not give one of those master classes. Because I lose whole days to self-doubt. David K. Barnes, who does wooden overcoats, he had a very popular tweet recently where he asked people, is like, have you been having, is anyone else, please make me feel better, has anyone else been having a really hard time writing under quarantine, under the pandemic or whatever? And lots of people replied talking about how, what a struggle they've been having. I've got all this free time to write. I should have written 2 novels in the last, but instead, but I didn't feel like I could reply to that with any honesty, because, yes, I've definitely struggled with getting writing done in the last couple of months, but I don't know that it's a new thing. I don't know that it's COVID-19 related.
You can't blame it on that.
I've always had terrible struggles with self-doubt. It's a lot of days where I can't even get started because I have this terrible cycle. Honestly, this might be the kind of thing I should go into therapy for. I'm not sure. Where like I'll be walking around, I'll be thinking of an idea, and I get incredibly excited about it. Make some notes, whatever. And then when I sit down and start trying to turn it into a script, like suddenly it all seems awful and cheesy, and everyone's going to laugh at me.
Well, that is, I so relate to that. And I think a lot of people do. I mean, I'm exactly the same. I get that white hot excitement, that thing when you get the first idea and you think, actually, this is great. This is actually a really good idea. It's great. And I start writing the notes, and sometimes I even write the note. I'm still fine when I write the notes. I'm okay. And then, as you say, when I actually start to actually write the thing, the little voice at the back of my head is saying, well, this is probably really, really, it's probably been done before. It's hacky. Why will they be interested in something coming from you? There's probably someone that can do this better, and on and on and on it goes. And it can be crippling to actually get anything done. It's, so when you get these periods like that, obviously you do get through it because you're producing things, you're getting things out there. So how do you overcome it? Is there an answer to it?
For me, it's honestly just been, I don't know how I would function if I was just a writer working by myself, generating scripts or pitches and then going out and trying to sell them. I have always had collaborators who are banging on the door waiting for stuff. Basically just people I work with saying, "Hey, Mac, where is it?" Is the thing that has galvanized me into action. Because I do a lot of procrastinating. I do there's a lot of paralysis. Basically, because there are people waiting for stuff, and since getting more into paid work, there's also been the element of, I won't eat, I won't pay rent if I don't get this done.
That's a good motivator.
It's something that gets into action. But none of the ways I deal with self-doubt are healthy. There's basically there's nothing I could tell the listeners of this podcast and be here's the way you should emulate Mac Rogers and his approach to it, because honestly I have not made any progress in the self-doubt aspect of it. And it's really weird too, because you would think that having some work go out there and be well received. Not everything has been, but I've had several things in theater and audio be well received. You think that would translate into confidence for next time, but for whatever reason, it never works. I think maybe because nobody knows where writing comes from exactly. If you've been training for a 5K, you know how your your cardiovascular ability is. Yeah, you know where you are in terms of how ready you are to go on a 5K. With writing, you could wake up any day and it would be gone. There's no muscles you can look at. So there's no so there's this part of it. There's definitely this thing of like, this time the words won't come. This time it won't happen. And so I haven't figured out an approach to. The only thing I could offer your listeners is commiseration. I feel very much it gets me all the time, and I haven't developed a process for addressing it.
Well, I think you have, but like most of us, I think you have, but you probably haven't formalized it, and you probably don't. It's subconscious, because even the collaboration thing, that's something that I definitely relate to. Especially with writing scripts and things, I definitely find it useful to bounce ideas off people, particularly in the early stages when I'm putting the story together, and the structure of it and things, and kind of the rough outline of things. I find it really helpful to just have someone to bounce off it, as much as anything else. If it's just somebody to tell me whether it is any good or it's got legs in the first place, because I think that's half the worry. You think, am I just wasting my time on this thing? So that definitely rings true. And whatever it is that you're doing, it's working, because you are still getting things out there. And as I say, it is such a common thing. I've spoken to authors that have written like 20 books, and a lot of them very, very successful. And I've asked this question, when they sit down to write the book tomorrow, the next book, do they have any self-doubt, or are they confident now because they've done it so many other times? And they say, no, every day, every time I sit down to write a new book, it is like starting again. It is like, am I still going to be able to do this? Will it still be received well? Will I get where I want to be with it? So you're not on your own.
I appreciate that. I remember I talked to a novelist a couple of years ago who he's like, honestly, I envy people who write scripts. He's like a novel is about a 3-year process.
Yeah.
Is it like you have to live off the fumes of the last one being well received.
That's a great way of putting it.
The writing, the rewriting, the extensive publishing process, or whatever. Like the fact that. I can forget how fortunate it is to be in a relatively quick turnaround field where at least, stuff's getting out there, people are reacting to it. Maybe, you're right. Maybe my process is just simply community. It's just simply having partners that force me to get stuff done. It's
deadline definitely helps. Yeah.
No doubt about it. So I definitely maybe the next time we talk, I'll have actually gotten something healthier in place.
I hope so. But either way, keep doing what you're doing. So just to kind of wrap up, just tell us. I know you can't probably be specific about what you've coming up next, but you've kind of hinted at it. I know a lot of it you can't actually say. Give us a sense of what you've got up next, and also where can people find you online and stuff.
Right now, the two best places to find me online is if you go on Twitter, I'm at MacWrites, MacWrites, or Gideon-Media.com. That's like the website for my audio production company. That's best places to find most current updates of what I'm doing. To be super vague, because I
understand. Yeah,
my company will have a big announcement relatively soon, but I will be releasing an audio adaptation of a play that I wrote. My audio company, there will be hopefully some announcements about some work that we've done for corporate clients in terms of like new audio fiction. And then there's another project that I haven't discussed at all, and it's called, handling the work of another playwright who I venerate very much. And I really hope that we can announce it soon, because it's a very special, it's a project that's very, very close to my heart, involving adapting the work of a playwright I really idolize. And that is hopefully coming out just a short bit later this year. I don't know exactly what platform it's going to come out on. That's still being determined, but that's a very special, unique project for me. So there will definitely be some new stuff from me personally and from my company this calendar year. And I apologize to listeners that it's so vague right now, but there's like a couple of like formalities being hammered out so that there can be a proper announcement, I hope, in the very near future.
Well, watch this space and follow Mac on Twitter anyway. He always makes me laugh. So yeah, you're always writing stuff even without realising it. So, but Mac, for now. It's been great to speak to you. Thanks very much for joining me today. It's been great.
It's a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation so much. Thank you, Wayne. I appreciate it.
Joined up writing.
Okay, thanks again to Mac, and do make sure you check out the Steal the Stars podcast and Life After, and follow Mac to find out more about his upcoming projects. I'll put all of those links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That's it for this week, but don't forget you can get the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever else it is that you get your podcasts from, and then you can have the show downloaded automatically every episode. Also, remember to leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps others to find the show, or just tell a friend. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.